maybe.
Really only a few weeks, huh?
Well, so it depends on weather. We're giving, I think, 60 days to complete the work, but once the contractor starts, he thinks, it can move pretty quickly, depending
It's
on
mostly
the weather.
fences and not much concrete or
So
something?
there is a fair amount of concrete, and we
Okay.
are bringing, if you recall, the area around the new entrance gets connected with the scout bench. So that's a fair amount of concrete, and we're bringing in a water line and drainage line, so.
And it's happening while it's closed, so it really doesn't
Yeah.
matter
but
as
I
far as
think-
that's concerned, yeah.
Right, so if we get a real wet December, it could drag on. If it's a nice dry December, well, I don't know if it's nice. A dry December, it could happen pretty quickly. But then the rest, you're right, is just fencing.
So exciting to see that.
It is, yeah.
2019.
Talking about it forever.
Todd and I were on the what do you call it, the focus group or whatever.
That even predated, that was 14?
Oh, I know, it's been going a lot before that, yeah. But,
Yeah,
but, yeah. But the report we did was,
And then the second announcement, so we had 2 fires on Albany Hill in September. One was occurred on September 11th, and this was on the northeast side of Albany Hill, around Middle Creek and Cerrito Creek. And then the second one was on September 25th, and this was on the southwest side. So this is on the large undeveloped private parcel. Both occurred early in the morning. Albany PD and Albany Fire responded very quickly and were able to contain the fire. So it's very limited damage to just the shrubs or brush around where it started. Public Works got involved in some of the cleanup work associated with it. And then since that point, we've been both fire and police, as well as Public Works, were out there fairly often. I've been patrolling the hills to keep an eye on things to make sure we don't have any more issues.
And these were some things I was glad that that you're able to talk about today, because we found out one of them I found out one of them right after our meeting last month where
It happened right before, and that was my oversight. There were just so many things going on.
we were getting a presentation on fire mitigation and things, and we didn't hear about it. But then the other one is newer. So then, what's the city's assessment that you know of for why these fires started? How these fires start?
I think they were related. I don't have all the details, but I think it were related to cooking fires.
Okay, so unhoused encampments or something like that. Okay.
all right, thank you. Any other announcements? Commission announcement?
One last thing on the dog park. We are, I think this week, going to roll out our standard information. We're going to post at the dog park, obviously. We're going to do e-news and all the other channels that we get information out, as well as our construction alerts on the Public Works website, which has pretty detailed information about all our projects.
But yeah, signage at the park entrance would
So,
be
yeah,
ideal, yeah.
We'll do something. Also, since these are Prop 68 funded, we also have a project sign that will be on site for the duration of the construction, but also I think a year or two after construction. There's a time period.
Now, one thing you didn't mention tonight, but something I emailed Public Works about today because somebody had posted on Nextdoor about it, was they were sort of complaining about, but wondering about when that sidewalk to nowhere was going to, what was the deal with that? And I got the answer back from somebody at Public Works saying,
Yeah,
Somebody.
somebody, that was me.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's included in the project. And in terms of the history, from what I understand, there was a large tree in that area that prevented so there's, if you go out there and walk around, there's a lot of roots that really bulb up in that area. So my guess is there was a large tree that would have required cutting roots. So that was probably the issue. And
so, but just to say that was something you didn't mention is also going to be done with the Prop 68 funding. Is that in one of those 2-week or 1-week timeframes?
that's in the December scope.
Okay.
Now, that was brought, it was included in the presentation that we had about a year ago.
Okay. And then I had 2 announcements. One was just that the Strollers and Rollers group that I'm also involved with had a great time at Ocean View Park with its 20th anniversary, that Also reserved the pickleball courts, and so tried to activate those, and I got some pickleball ambassadors out there to coach people through that, and it was great to see those new courts being used and people discovering them who didn't know about them. And then also I noticed that the city announced Albany Hill Park, there was an announcement about the Albany Hill Cross, the conclusion to that. And so anybody who wants to get the details on the conclusion to that can look at the city council meeting, first few minutes, where they talk about the conclusion to that whole thing.
All right.
Jamira just reminded me of another announcement. We have our compost giveaway this Saturday, starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, I believe.
8 o'clock, yeah.
8 o'clock, running until compost.
Is this at Memorial or at the community center?
It's at Memorial Park along Carmel. Standard place that we've done it in the past. So look forward to seeing everyone.
What does that consist of? A big pile and you shovel it yourself, or bags? And
No, it's their, Jeff, I don't know if how many tons we get, but it's palletized, and Public Works folks will there's a process where you sign a waiver, you drive up, everyone gets, 4 or 5 bags, something like that.
Yeah, we're usually pretty flexible about that, but I think it's, strictly speaking, I think it's a 2-bag, but we're accommodated. It's they're the standard garden 1 cubic yard.
And Public Works folks will be there on hand to load them into vehicles.
Or bikes.
Yeah, actually, we get a lot of people who bring little baskets.
Red wagons.
Yeah, you don't need
And the goal is to not have any left over when you're done.
that's the goal.
That's the goal. Okay. All right, any other commissioner announcements? No? All right. We can move on then. Our first item tonight is the street tree management plan, item 5.1. Speakers.
I will make a very brief introduction, then turn it over to our consulting team. But let me first take care of presentation logistics. Okay, so I'm going to give a brief recap. I think commissioners, we just lost our quorum for a second. We should probably pause until we have everybody in the room. Same thing happened at planning and zoning last night, I understand.
We're not used to having razor-thin margins here where, okay, yeah, he's just stepped out. I hope.
I think he just went to get water.
Yeah.
So when were you guys last here? Was it 2 months ago, 3 months ago? It would have been 2 months ago.
I think so. I think it was just you last time.
Just last time, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of
Yeah, okay.
a little bit of a blur.
No, it's
Honest.
they all blur together. No doubt. I have no doubt.
Unfortunately or fortunately, you'll be seeing us a lot.
Likely next meeting, too.
Okay, all right.
Is it working now? Not yet.
Well, how about those 49ers?
Boo.
You don't even have any teams you can mention anymore. It's like-
I don't think it's a violation of the Brown Act to report the score if anybody's watching.
Score is 23-17. 49ers are winning. Third quarter.
That's anybody's game at this point.
So then it should be.
All right. Quorum back in the room, so I'll get started again.
Restored.
This is just a brief overview. The commissioner is well familiar with this, but just for people who might be watching, who are joining kind of midstream, this is a planning process for a street tree management plan. It's essentially two phases. It began in 2022, the first phase of which was preparing an inventory of the city's street trees. That was prepared by a firm called Arbor Pro, and they went throughout the city, street by street, identified tree by tree, the very basics of size and condition, rough indication of condition, species, location, and so forth. That has all been loaded into the city's GIS system, and there's a viewer available on the city's webpage for people to take a look at that, and they can see, again, individual trees and some of the details that was collected as part of that inventory. The second phase is what we're here this evening. We began in 2023, the process of selecting a consultant to prepare the plan, the management plan, to really use that inventory to evaluate what we have, and then to begin the process of making some recommendations to us about how we can best maintain and expand and improve our street tree canopy. So the planning process, the firm that was selected was Hort Science Bartlett Consulting. Our colleagues here with Hort Science and Bartlett are going to make that presentation to you in a moment. They began in the fall of 2023, and they've been here a couple times now, 2 or 3 times, with some interim reports. And we're here yet again, I think, with a more substantive report than we had last time, with some of their results of their analysis. Again, this is a work in progress, so we welcome your feedback and insights, and assure you that we will continue to grind through this with you and with other members of the community. They are always welcome to reach out to city staff, to the consultants directly, however they want to engage with us as we fully develop this plan ultimately for the city council to review and consider probably early next year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Daria and Ryan.
Thank you so much for having us once again. I'm going to introduce myself again. I'm Daria Barar, the Managing Urban Forester and Arborist with Hort Science Bartlett Consulting. And Brian and I have been working on this project, as you know. We're back here tonight with a little bit more of a substantive first portion of our plan. Ryan's going to jump into that in just a moment. But I did want to give just a brief overview of our timeline. As Jeff mentioned, we'll be looking to sort of wrap this up towards the beginning of the year. And at our next Pros Commission meeting, we're hoping to bring back the rest of the kind of recommendation section. So tonight is really going to focus on the who, what, where of the project, and kind of an analysis and some comparison. So with that, I'm going to introduce Ryan Settle.
Hi, everybody. Hi again. My name's Ryan, consulting arborist and urban forester at Hort Science, Bartlett Consulting. And yeah, let's dive right on into this. So like Daria and Jeff already mentioned, this will be kind of the intro section. So our final report will be divided into roughly 6 chapters. We'll cover the first 4 today, including setting the introduction and context of what this plan is, what a street tree management plan is broadly. 2, how does that fit into the city of Albany in terms of their history, other planning documents that relate to this. Number 3 is really diving into that Arbor Pro street tree inventory that was completed in 2023, taking a close look at what the city has as a resource, how that benefits the city now, and what we might want to maximize into the future to really maximize those benefits that these street trees are providing. And then in Chapter 4, Daria will go over the current tree management and protections in the city. So question number 1, taking a big, broad view at this, why care about the urban forest at all? Why care about urban trees? So 1, as we all know, I think we went over this at both of our last meetings, they bring ecosystem services to the community. One that I'm sure is on everybody's mind after this past heat wave is heat cooling in terms of shade and evapotranspiration cooling. In a city with as much paved area and impervious surface as Albany, this will only become more important into the future. Social sustainability is another large aspect of urban forests and the benefits therein. This really lies in the beautification potential and placemaking potential of big trees, especially mature, old, large trees. Improved physical and mental health of the residents, and it encourages walkability in the city, which ties really nicely into the economic benefits, economic sustainability on a city scale, and how trees can work into that. Increased walkability means more people going into storefronts, increase in sales. It also increases property values where trees are planted out front. So all of those really tie together nicely. You can put a nice bow on that, and who doesn't want more trees with that? We do want to be mindful of equity. So all of these benefits, these good things that trees bring us, that Daria and I are excited about, they're really localized to where the tree is planted. You're not going to get cooling benefits from a 50-foot tall tree half a mile away on the other side of town. So we want to make sure that these trees are equitably distributed around, and the benefits that they bring are equally, equitably delivered to the residents. So now that we all care about the urban forest, why a street tree management plan? A street tree management plan deals only with trees growing in the public right-of-way, so it's not going to discuss park trees or private trees. We're looking at trees along the sidewalk, like the one in this photo here. And we really want to understand the resource so we can prioritize things that we want to maximize those benefits in order to manage it into the future. So Chapter 2, understanding the city of Albany in the context of what might be important in the street tree management plan. So there are 14 neighborhoods here, which is kind of how we've prioritized equitable distribution of trees. Overall, the city landscape is largely developed residential. It is most commonly impervious land cover, and I'll get into that in the next chapter here. But all that to say is that this this intense development has led to literal, natural, so to speak, conditions present in the public right-of-way. Historically, Albany was an oak woodland. Very little characteristics of the oak woodland exist in the little planting strips along the street. So we do have to be mindful of that in species selection, in the management of the trees, and therein. Connections with other city planning efforts. We've talked about these in our previous presentations, but a lot of our overarching goals and vision come from these two documents, the Albany 2035 General Plan and the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, which was adopted in 2019. The CAP almost calls for a street tree management plan. It actually verbatim calls for an urban forest management plan, which is kind of the next step above. That would include your park trees, your private trees, things like that. What we're focusing on is kind of a piece of that, and some of the overarching goals in our document could be used to shape an urban forestry plan, but we do want to make that distinction that this only covers street trees. Yeah. All right, so getting into the meat of this, what do we have? Chapter 3 assesses the urban forest on a canopy scale down to the individual tree, the inventory analysis, and then what these trees are bringing the city. So I'll start with the canopy cover assessment, then the inventory ecosystem service here. So I believe we brought a similar figure to this almost a year ago in last October. Our initial canopy cover assessment was conducted through iTree Canopy. It's a Forest Service product in collaboration with Arbor Day Foundation, the ISA, and several other professional organizations. How it works is it's an analysis of random samples to estimate canopy cover over a defined land area. And when I say canopy cover, imagine an aerial view like that's on the slide right now. Canopy cover is represented by the amount of land area that is covered by trees. It's a little hard to see in this figure, but there's a tiny yellow crosshair in the middle. So you go through frame by frame and classify images until you get a rough estimation of the canopy cover of the city. So on the city level, as I referenced a couple of times before, and as we got the related public comment at the beginning, there's a lot of impervious surface in Albany. 24% of the land area cover is impervious buildings. So there's a lot of area where rain's not going to get soaked in. The benefits of trees are limited. Overall, trees, including street trees and trees elsewhere, accounted for around 20% of land cover area, which is close to the average for urban areas in California. The Forest Service did a study a handful of years ago, and the statewide average is around 19. So we're right there. That's not to say that it can't be improved and benefits won't be realized if that was increased, though. But just to kind of contextualize where the city is now. Out of that 20%, as we see in this third from the bottom row on the right, 4% land cover is represented by street trees alone. So those are trees in the right of way. Around 4 times as much tree cover comes from trees elsewhere in the city. So again, we're only discussing a portion of the trees in Albany here. So we know what we have on the city level. I wanted to take a look at the equitable distribution of this. So we use those 14 neighborhood footprints to do individual studies within the bounds of these neighborhoods. Broadly speaking, trees in the east, closer to the hills, had more canopy than those in the west. You can see that Hillside is an outlier. As I'm sure nobody is surprised, Albany Hill has a lot of trees, so canopy cover is going to be higher there. To control for this, and also to highlight street trees only, I looked at what are street trees providing, and that same trend is still visible with trees in the east having a bit more tree cover coming only from street trees here even than neighborhoods in the west, with Thousand Oaks actually being the most street tree forested neighborhood in the city. So to take a bit finer grain here, we looked at the inventory analysis conducted by ArborPro. It contains around 4,900 trees, which we can see here in the viewer app. It's actually really neat. You can go in, they have a picture of every tree. It's fun to go look at and just see what you have. If you're like me, I'm sure. If you're a tree nerd like me, yeah. Anyways, so we have some good news. Most were in excellent, very good, or good condition. And just to illustrate what that might look like, here are 2 examples of trees belonging to the same species. Nichols, willow leaf peppermint. They're really landscape-defining trees along Solano. The one on the right is in front of Flowerland, and it's really a beautiful specimen. It's a great example of the species. The one on the left is not quite as in good shape. The crown is smaller, it's dying back from the tips, and it's just not in good condition. And you can see in these photos that the one on the right, tree's in good condition and provides more shade, more benefit than the one on the left, which is really why we care about the condition that the trees are in, because good condition trees, larger trees bring more benefits to the community, and we want to shape our management policies to encourage good condition trees, encourage those large trees to bring those benefits to the residents. So we know that most were in good shape, 37 were in fair, and proportionally few were poor, critical, or dead, which was really not concerning, the opposite, encouraging. Species diversity was also good. 175 unique species belonging to 103 genera were encountered. 15 of the most common species made up 64% of all trees, so not each species was equally represented. This palette is broadly similar to what we see elsewhere in the East Bay. One thing that stood out is that most of these top 15 species are small at maturity. So the benefits that they have the capability to bring are proportionate to that mature size. Including crepe myrtle, the #1 species. There's a general guideline of urban forestry that a forest should not be made up of more than 10% of any single species, 20% of any single genus, and 30% of any single family. This diversity protects against pest outbreaks. You're not going to lose all your trees. If you're familiar with what folks are facing with emerald ash borer elsewhere in the country, You come along, you lose your number one tree, and you lose a considerable amount of the canopy. So on the whole, this list actually does a good job of reaching that guideline with the exception of crepe myrtle, which fails the 10%. It's roughly 11% of the street trees in the city. Let's see here. So to look at where these trees come from broadly, most are exotic ornamental species. 97% of the street trees are. Around 3% are native to California, but California has, we're a biodiversity hotspot in the world. There are a numerous amount of ecotones, so just because it's from California doesn't mean it's going to perform well here. Around 2% of the trees are from the broad Albany area. So there is room, figuratively speaking, to plant more native trees where they are appropriate and able to thrive in the site. That being said, these ornamental exotic trees are bringing considerable benefits to the city right now. Oh, I've lost control of the PowerPoint. Okay. And just broadly speaking, on the importance of large trees, we noticed that a lot of the trees in the street tree inventory are small maturing. Environmental benefits are directly proportionate to leaf area, mostly. So more leaves equals more shade is really the easiest way to understand that. More leaves also provide more surface for pollutants to be filtered out of the air. It can lessen heating and cooling costs more effectively. But broadly speaking, more tree equals more benefit, so that's going to be one of our guiding principles in the future, as well as placemaking to the less definable, less quantifiable, I should say, features of trees. Larger trees have a greater visual impact on the landscape, and we want to make sure that that's possible in the future. And it's illustrated here. I call this slide a tale of two ginkgos. So they're in the same town, same species. I just planted this one on the left a couple seconds before snapping this photo. The one on the right is the largest one in the state. These are both in Northampton, Massachusetts. So you can tell the location's pretty similar. It's just a factor of time. So we want to protect these big trees because they deliver a lot of benefit, where the one on the left maybe it doesn't deliver a lot today, but it does have that potential. So it's a two-pronged approach between protecting old existing trees and then coming in and replacing and encouraging the next generation of trees. So we can't only focus on planting, we have to focus on the big trees as well. Okay, so we've broadly defined the benefits of trees. Let's quantify them. Some people really like numbers, and we can do that. So we used iTree Eco. It's made by the same people who used iTree Canopy, the program that we use to do the canopy assessment. This takes real tree data and estimates the ecosystem services they deliver individually based on the species, the size, and the health, all of which we pulled from the Arbor Pro inventory. So we have a pretty good idea of what the trees are actually bringing to the city right now. Broadly speaking, they improve Albany's air and water quality for the health of its citizens and save mitigation dollars every year for the community. Around 1.6 tons of air pollution are removed. This is really important for the city, in our opinion, given the proximity to major highways and large roads. There's a lot of air pollution coming from car exhaust, and these trees do a good job of filtering that out. Around 80 tons of carbon are sequestered every year. That will only increase as the trees grow in size, with a market value of around $14,000. 305,000 gallons of stormwater runoff are avoided every year with those trees. And they currently store, so this is the carbon that's already in the trunks of these trees, is around 2,000 tons of carbon with a market value of $361,000. And again, that will increase every year with the increase in sequestration as these trees grow in diameter. So what does this mean for managing Albany's trees in the future? Like I've already referred to a couple of times, future management decisions, procedures, policies, what have you, need to maximize these benefits over time, and they need to ensure that these benefits are equitably distributed across the city. And with that, I'll hand it over to Daria.
All right. So we looked at some of the policies and guidelines that Albany has to help us understand the management and protection of trees in the right-of-way. So there's two different kind of ideologies around tree maintenance for cities to manage trees in the right-of-way. One is through reactive pruning, which is essentially just when something happens to the tree, then the tree crew is activated to go out and handle that issue or that problem. The alternate is through what's often commonly referred to as block pruning. That's where pretty much every tree on the block gets either pruned or inspected every certain period of time, and it's tends to be less expensive, and you'll see that play out in the numbers tonight, because when you have an entire crew that's already activated on that block, they're already set up for pruning, they're already, have the sidewalk closed and things like that. It's a little less expensive than spot checking here and there. However, that actually doesn't really pertain to Albany, because Albany has what we're calling not a great term, but a shared maintenance agreement with residents and property owners in Albany. It's by way of the fact that if you own a property in Albany, you are responsible for the tree that is in the right-of-way adjacent to that property. So we're calling it a shared maintenance agreement. We haven't really come up with a good term for that, so if you guys have some suggestions, we're definitely open to hearing those. So we looked at other cities in the East Bay area. In looking and doing projects like this with other cities as well, it's a little difficult to look outside of the Bay Area and specifically outside of California, and we have caught some flack for this in the past, but I just wanted to mention that it's a little difficult to compare prices in other places to California because we have such a different economy, and particularly the Bay Area has a particular expense with it.
Just like housing.
Yeah, just like housing, exactly. So in the cities that we looked at, there are several, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, that have a reactive maintenance approach, and there are several that have proactive maintenance approaches. We found tree populations to vary greatly. Some cities are very large in area and therefore have more street trees. Other cities are more similarly sized to Albany and have similarly sized urban forests. The helpful part about looking at some of these other cities is also being able to compare costs and expenditures. So we looked at the city of Albany's expenditures, and we looked at our neighboring cities, and in order to understand what the comparative costs are. It's a little bit difficult in Albany because pruning records were a little bit difficult to come by. And so understanding the pruning costs was made a little bit more difficult. But we were able to understand what average pruning costs are with the grid pruning because it's listed on a rate sheet that was provided for several different cities. And that was $140 for a grid pruning, which is generally just raising over the sidewalk, raising over the street, and removal of any dead or hazardous branches. So on average, we found that the city of Albany is paying about $480 per pruning, and comparatively, other cities are paying about $140 per pruning. Now, other cities may be pruning more trees, which is why they're getting a lower unit cost. So there's other influences on those costs. It's not quite apples to apples. All right. In terms of planting, the city is doing a great job of planting trees, about an average of about 140 trees a year, which is fantastic. And this year, I know that we have information that will be another banger year for tree planting, so that's lovely. I understand that the City of Albany's voters mandated that sidewalk repair was important to them, and they also were able to fund a sidewalk repair program. So through that sidewalk repair program, as you guys have heard about on many different occasions, and I have been lucky enough to join you on several of them, we have reviewed information about trees and sidewalk repair. So on average, we looked at the information and we were able to find that a total of 429 locations where sidewalk was repaired. Of those, we found that 322 locations had root pruning that was completed. It resulted in the removal of 16 trees, and at 91 locations, no tree work was done at all. So who are our top offenders in terms of tree species? I don't think this will surprise anyone that our top offenders are sweet gum and camphor. Those are both large trees and tend to have pretty aggressive root systems. Camphor is a fantastic street tree. It just needs a very large parkway. It's a beautiful tree with a lot of leaf area. Same thing with sweet gum. It's a top offender in most East Bay cities and many around the Bay Area and Southern California. All right, so based on the root pruning data that we got, these are some of the other offenders that were not pushed into the removal category, but just in terms of sidewalk lift. These were some of the top offenders. So I want to take a step back and just say that in terms of planting, we talked a lot about the benefits of larger urban trees. And one thing we haven't really touched on yet is the fact that in Albany, much like a lot of other cities in the Bay Area, we have very narrow parkways. So large trees are not a good match for a narrow parkway. And what that leads to is sidewalk repair, right? So one of the very important things about tree planting is actually placing the right tree in the right location. So sometimes we're going to see a smaller tree canopy or a smaller tree at mature size because the planting location does not afford a larger tree. So we want to avoid root pruning and sidewalk repair in the future by planting a tree that is appropriate for that specific location. So there's a lot of factors that go into tree planting, and that's one of the many factors. All right, moving on from root pruning to tree removal. We looked at the municipal code, and there is one criteria for emergency tree removal. It seems pretty in line with many other cities around. Emergency is deemed by the urban forester, or a lot of times there's a fire department can also, on off hours, deem an emergency removal. There are 6 criteria for non-emergency tree removals. And I think the real takeaway for us when we were reviewing these criteria is that criteria for removal can lead to a lot of animosity and friction when there's not a lot of clarity. Clarity leads to being able to understand reasons for removal and then be able to make a finding that is clear. So what we found in this is actually not unlike a lot of other cities that we work with, but there is a lack of clarity in these non-emergency tree removal criteria, which I think has led to a lot of situations where people don't know what the right thing is to do, and they don't know what they're looking for. So that, I think, is an area we're definitely interested in working with the city to rectify. Did I miss something there?
Just referencing industry standards.
Yes, thank you. I knew oops, went crazy on me too. A little bit. All right, yeah, so what we would focus on, or what we want to focus on here, is really moving towards using industry standards, particularly regarding tree risk. There are really good industry standards along these lines, and that's something that we have worked with other cities to make happen. So another piece that is very important to urban forestry is record keeping. It sounds very sexy, I know, but actually keeping track of stuff helps us to be able to understand what we're doing in terms of management. So that is something we're also looking at, and a couple of the things that popped up for us were that work is currently being tracked on separate spreadsheets, paper, notebooks, invoices, stuff like that, which is difficult to maintain that information into the future. Yeah, difficult to report on that kind of information. And then, of course, in terms of updating the inventory and making sure that it's accurate on a day-to-day basis, that is something that is really important to urban forestry work. All right, so that concludes our first 4 chapters, just kind of on a brief overview. And we are hoping to be here in November to talk about chapters 5 and 6. Chapter 5 is community perspective, so we're still hoping to get a little bit more feedback from community members. We have, just to give you guys an update, we have reached out to each individual member of the community who had a tree removal application over the last 4 years and gotten some really good feedback there. And we continue to work with you as our steering committee and to help us understand what's happening in your necks of the woods.
That sounded like a conclusion. Are you folks? Thank you very much.
That's it.
At this point, we bring it to the commission. Any questions, clarifying questions, something you need explained a little more? You're looking for sorts of feedback, just anything? Any particular, if you could ask a question, what would you want the answer to?
Yeah, so if I could ask a question.
You don't have to answer that right now if you want.
Okay.
To jump in. We want to provide valuable feedback.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering what that
Yeah, yeah.
The discussion part of this item, or would that be the?
Well, I'm asking a question.
Oh, that's your question.
This is a question.
Your question is, what are their questions? Okay, I got it.
Right, I wasn't going to answer the question.
Okay,
I was just going to ask what they're looking for.
got it. Okay.
I think involved in urban forestry is a lot of education. And I think some part of what we're going to be making recommendations on is how we can encourage and expand the education and outreach portion of the city's work with people, because trees don't survive unless the tree owner or tree manager is committed to the same outcome that we have. So I think especially along the lines of right tree, right place, and along the lines of encouraging larger canopy trees to be planted, because it's one thing to want to plant larger trees, it's another thing to actually have the space to plant larger trees, and it's a third thing to have the resident also want that. So those are the kind of 3 pieces, and that key piece is the resident has to want it as well.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission?
You had a couple questions. I reviewed the document, of course, and your presentation was a little different, so I skipped around on trying to follow. Some of those graphics were pretty good. And often I'd have a question, then I found it was answered later on, so hopefully. But just for a clarification, when you estimated the canopy cover, I think I asked this before too, I just want to remind myself, then you have an estimate for how much impervious surface it is. So if there's a tree over a sidewalk, you're not counting the sidewalk under the tree as impervious. Okay, so that's...
No, it'd just be, from an aerial view, 2-dimensional. So if there was sidewalk underneath the tree, it would just be counted as tree cover. So you can see.
Okay, so does that kind of throw off your well, you're not really doing stormwater calculations. So why would you need that information for impervious surface if it's not really an accurate measurement?
It's just a general estimate, so we can see, that kind of contextualizes how important tree canopy is. If anything, that would be underselling how much impervious surface there is in the city. And at 24%, that's already pretty high. So that, I want to set the context for how important that shade cooling of these trees is, and just give a more representative picture of everything that makes up that land cover area in the city.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what the other cities were like in comparison to us, and voila, there was a chart, which was great. One thing on that chart, it looked like it was hard to understand the population related. It's more, I think what was missing was a length of street tree. I mean, how many miles of street do we have? And then you get an idea of how underpopulated or overpopulated our streets are with trees in comparison, because you couldn't really quite tell that. And I know those cities, so I have an idea, but it wasn't something that, I mean, population, I think for El Cerrito and Albany was pretty close, right? I'm not sure what it is, but trees were significantly different. But El Cerrito is a much bigger place, so more streets.
That'd be interesting to look at.
Yeah. Let's see, other things. Okay, and down on, oh, yeah, just for, I think people listening, you mentioned how the native trees might not work well for the streets. Can you elaborate why they don't work well?
Yeah, some trees in the inventory that were native to the Albany area have characteristics that are just not appropriate for future tree planting. And I'll give two examples. There are a few coffee berries in the inventory, which is really a small shrub. So it's not appropriate, being arguably not a tree. And on the other extreme, there were a few coast redwoods, arguably the largest tree species in the entire world, and it's just not appropriate to plant those in the small, limited growth areas of Albany's rights-of-way.
And oak trees, you said, was that what you said? Oak? I couldn't hear you very well.
Oh, sorry, what?
Was the first one oak?
No, first one, there were a few coffee berries.
Coffee berry, okay, I thought you
native
said
shrub.
Cottonwood, okay.
No, about half of those natives were coast live oak, which isn't going to work everywhere in the city, but can be a successful street tree if there's enough space for it to develop.
Right, and acorns dropping, tripping hazards.
Yeah, so you have to be mindful of what's around, but it doesn't face the same just outright not appropriate status. Yeah.
I'm just bringing that because there's a lot of people interested in more native trees, and we all should be in the right place, like you mentioned. But
Yeah.
I mean, from a landscape architect's point of view, it's a constant conversation we're having about trees that the urban street tree has to serve a different purpose. I mean, many purposes that native trees don't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a conversation that Daria and I have with people all the time, as I'm sure it goes similarly to how you do. Yep, there was actually an excellent article in the LA Times last week about that very issue. Yeah, it's really about function of the street trees. You need to match the function and the form and the place.
As well, it's arguably not a native environment, right? A planted area between the curb and the sidewalk and the street is not a native setting. The soil texture and such is very different than the native places.
That's right. A site that would be healthy for an oak tree isn't necessarily a 24-inch slot.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're talking about oaks, which are particularly well adapted to urban environment and an urban setting. But trees more like a big leaf maple or something are really not appropriate at all for a street tree planting. So there's some trees that are better potential as a street tree, but there's other trees that are just really don't meet that category as even potential street tree planting.
Okay.
And I would like to add just one
My question.
quick note on that.
I had a few questions.
We want to focus on climate-adapted species, so projecting where we're going to be in the future. With Albany, that might be, in addition to potentially using natives, we really want to focus on climate-adapted species in the future.
And I think one more last question, which I think is you'll probably answer in your next phase, is you're looking at other species that we may not have here that would work well. And of those, I think got 175 species, and you only listed like 30, so there's those others that weren't listed, where there are probably just a few of them. Any of those, like, really great trees that we haven't really explored, or just really odd trees that shouldn't have been there?
Yeah, there's actually been quite a bit of extensive research on trying to project where we are with our climate, where we will be with our climate, and what trees are living already, currently thriving in those environments. So we look at, for this context, we are looking at, I can't remember our comparison city. Do you remember?
For the future.
Yeah, for our future climate.
Yes, Santa Barbara and south.
Yeah, more Southern California type trees. So trees, we're trying to look at trees that are really thriving in those environments, because that's our climate future. And so what trees are thriving in those environments, and then planting them, because unfortunately, the climate has changed faster than the native tree plant palette. So though a tree may have been native, years ago, and may not be native in the future because of the climate changes. So we look at climate adapted, and we are trying to promote climate adapted species, because as the climate is changing, we are going to see different species being successful in our area.
I had a few questions. One was, I live in the Hillside neighborhood, which the image showed as a street tree poor region, one of several on the west side. And so I know on my own block, some years ago, a neighbor tried to organize a street tree planting kind of thing with, the city had some sort of incentive for that, and reduced fees or something, and tried to get people on board. And a few people signed up for new street trees, but a number of there are some apartment buildings and some other rented areas and some things, and not a whole lot of homeowners or landlords took up the city's offer. And so how much of that is you mentioned that for block pruning, my understanding of what you said was that there was a barrier to doing that in Albany because of the shared responsibility with the homeowner and the city. So is that also related to like the city not being able to just plant street trees where it wants to? The homeowner has to buy in?
Yeah, so the city that I used to work for in Southern California, we maintained trees on a proactive pruning cycle. But we also required, prior to planting, the property owner or the adjacent owner to at least engage with us around the tree planting. So we did a lot of planting and maintenance, but we also encourage and needed the adjacent property owner to at least buy into that a little bit. So there's always going to be some piece of shared maintenance in the right-of-way, because it is really not just the city who maintains that, and even in the best-case scenario where you have the funding and the city maintenance dollars behind that, there's always going to be a little bit of a back and forth with residents. So we do really need residents to be educated on why trees are important and why trees will make a difference in their neighborhood, and at least to say that they're willing to have a tree in front of their house and or their apartment building and or their area. Does that make sense? Answer your question?
I think so. So also in the street tree poor neighborhoods, it sounds like even in that other city, and I guess not in Albany, the city can't just plant where it wants to.
Yeah, the city can.
It can.
Absolutely, they can.
It's just that may not be a recipe for success for the street trees
Exactly.
to thrive. Okay.
It's much harder to get success when you don't have buy-in from adjacent property owners.
So then what would the equity component look like for trying to improve the street tree canopy in street tree poor neighborhoods?
Yeah, I think more planting where the city would have more responsibility around watering and small tree care would be a model that we could use to increase canopy cover in those neighborhoods.
Okay.
Another piece is better education and better understanding about what the benefits are that trees provide.
Another question I had was one of the stats from the census of trees, street trees, said that 50-something% were in good shape or around there, and 30-something% were fair shape. And you folks didn't seem too fazed by any of that. Does that 56% isn't usually good in school? How typical is that for a city? Do you have any concerns about that?
No, not at all. It's pretty normal to have trees in all different kinds of conditions. In fact, it's something that's very important. It's important for cities to maintain a tree canopy that is diverse in all ways, in particularly in species and age. So if one tree is planted at the same time all along the street, it looks great for maybe 40, 50 years, and then as those trees start to age out and mature out, then you have a whole street of
You wouldn't know
aging,
anything
mature
about that.
trees. It can be a real liability for the city. So the best case scenario is that you have trees that are being planted and trees that are being removed all the time.
So some of it's an age-related thing. So if you looked at the human population in this city, it might be kind of similar. Is what
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I have to say that based on the data that we have, it skews very young, right? So very small trees. Rather than having a lot of aging mature trees, there's a lot of young trees in the right-of-way.
Okay. And then you said that you thought by going with industry standard criteria for tree removal, that would help with public response, improve public response to tree removals. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what an industry standard criteria, do you think people just will accept the authority? And because what we have is there's these massive trees in some neighborhoods that have, for example, liquid ambers in certain neighborhoods in the eastern part of town that there's just been several of those have been removed, and I think whether or not if the check boxes look different on a report, I think there's going to be a similar response from the public, but why do you think this other method would be better?
Great question. So clarity, when you're able to understand clearly what the direction is helps an applicant know what findings they need to make, right? So if you're from the sort of planning side of things, one of the things that planners do is ask that when you're building a project that it confines to these criteria, right? And these criteria is generally that we kind of build the box, right? And you decide how you want things to look within that box, right? So it's okay to go 35 feet, but not okay to go 36 feet, that kind of stuff when you're building a house, right? So what we want to do is something similar so that we can use our industry standards to say, we'll accept this level of risk, but maybe not this elevated level of risk. So those are kind of findings that can be made, and there is some variation always. And I'm not going to say that it's going to remove all emotion from this, because big trees come with placemaking, and part of that is very emotional. So there's always going to be some frustration and friction in the process of removing large trees. That's just part of the work, and it's part of the incredible benefit that trees provide is these emotional things that are in our environment and help us to grow and live as humans, right? So, however, when a tree reaches a certain level of risk or has defects that are concerning, and there are findings that can be made around those defects, that hopefully will make the process a little bit more understandable, so that neighbors and other area residents would understand and have an opportunity to thoughtfully get to a place where they understand what's happening.
So they may still not like it, but they may have a deeper understanding of why it's happening.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And, you know, there's other opportunities within pruning work that can be taken. Part of the problem with having a shared maintenance agreement with residents, whereby residents are really pruning street trees, is that the city doesn't have a lot of those opportunities. So the city that I used to work in Southern California, we basically didn't remove trees unless they were completely dead. And we would prune back laterals that were dead back to misshaping the tree, essentially, and let them kind of live out their natural life. Now, the city can't really do that right now because they don't have the way that the shared maintenance agreement is set up is that it's the adjacent property owner's responsibility to do that kind of work. So if the city were to take on more of the maintenance responsibility, they might be able to take a stronger stance against removal of trees and might be able to prune back branches so that there was a reduction of that risk, but still maintaining the tree, just in a different kind of shape and format. Those kinds of trees become kind of wildlife snags and can provide benefit to wildlife and can provide some of those ecosystem benefits similar to what they're providing now, but just reduced because they have those reduced crowns that are safer, frankly.
Okay, I see. So you're saying that the shared maintenance agreement has language that excludes the city from doing like proactive pruning and things like that. And so is that something you folks are looking at to maybe the city change the language of that? But then there might need to be a financial component of that to support that from the city side. Okay, that's it.
All right, any other, yeah.
Yeah, I have a few questions. First, I want to apologize for interrupting the meeting earlier, but I guess like if we're talking about equity, one thing that's important to acknowledge, I guess, is like we don't have equity in planting area as well. Like a lot of these areas with like less trees right now, there might be little or even no parking, like planting strips, along the sidewalk, or there's like a lot of apartments with driveways in the way. And I was just wondering, like, I don't know if this was in the scope, but is there like any data that we have to like see what areas have bigger planting strips or not, or that may be more labor intensive?
Unfortunately, there's not data on that. That is something that we could look at and make recommendations on, but currently we don't have data on that.
And I imagine city staff may have some idea. I mean, you guys go around, you know where the sidewalks are, yeah.
I think we have some basic information, but in terms of all the factors that drive it, sidewalk, driveways, utilities, all these things factor into that we don't necessarily have a complete handle on.
All right, I think we can open it for public comment now. See if,
We do have Catherine's hand is raised.
all right, great, thank you, Catherine.
Catherine, go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much for the comprehensive and thoughtful presentation. Really informative and interesting to hear about. I want to appreciate the distinction between the urban forest, not just a street tree management plan, and that having an urban forest plan is really important to think comprehensively and holistically about trees in the city. So that would include not just parks or street trees, but also private property. If you look at East Palo Alto, they have a great example of this as well. And in San Francisco, they do street tree management by the city as well. So a couple different models to think about this, but having a more holistic approach could be really beneficial to increase canopy in Albany. Additionally, I think I'd like to encourage everybody here, maybe it's just out of scope of this meeting, but to protect trees, especially native trees on private property. Berkeley, Oakland, other cities have private property protections for native trees for the ecosystem benefits they provide, some biodiversity and all of that. So something to consider around native trees as well as private property in addition to street trees. About the comment about the coffeeberry being more of a shrub than a large tree, that might be appropriate in other spaces that could be like little parklet type places, or looking for ways to expand the removal of hardscape and add more natives to the area in places that large trees are not appropriate. So I would encourage the commission to be creative in where we can expand native trees and shrubs and related species, so we can have more birds, bees, flowers, pollinators, et cetera, to help improve the climate here. And then in terms of education, there are a lot of different organizations that are interested in this kind of thing in the schools. The Albany Rotary has an environmental commission, and the Albany Foundation Coalition has a tree team where volunteers have put flyers about the city's free street tree planting program in folks' mailboxes. So I'd encourage the city to work with volunteer groups to help get the word out about these opportunities to increase tree cover. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you very much. Any other comments?
We do have another hand raised.
Okay, very good.
Dave, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to also just kind of tag on with Catherine and I would like for us to also, take a look at, the trees and such on private property. That's part of the overall urban forest, and I think like she mentioned, some other cities do have tree preservation on private property, and I would like for Albany also to kind of look into this, and I think there's a lot of great trees, native trees, etc. On private property that are providing good habitat and canopy, etc. And I think it would be important for us to look at preserving those resources as we also look to progress more street trees, etc. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
That's all the hands that are raised.
All right, we can bring it back to the commission for some discussion.
Looking good. I mean,
You were gesturing, so you get to go first.
I guess I liked a lot of the graphics you showed there. Really clarified. I was disappointed they weren't in here, but maybe the next time the graphics will be in the report that we review. The eye-tree diagrams that showed the various benefits of each.
Our memo was mostly text.
This presentation will be posted after the meeting, more than likely tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other comments? I had a couple things to say, and I'm drawing a blank on one of them. I was just thinking about it. I did want to push back. Well, I don't want to push back, but I wanted to point out that item number 6 that you specifically pulled out, that's my item. I added that when we redid this 5-10 years ago. And because, I'll tell you why. Because the previous version of the street removal policy, all the commission could do was rubber stamp. We couldn't exercise any judgment as citizens, as property owners, as residents of Albany. And I thought that the role of this is to represent the interests and the values of the community. So I think that, actually we're saying the same thing. You just read it a little differently than I intended it, or than we intended it. And that under, with the, because I think you say something about it later, but with the insight and the evaluation by the criteria of risk, the commission's role is say, is that risk we would be willing to accept if this was our property, if this was our house, or if we were living here? Is this, so they can talk about the risk that it's going to damage the foundation or destroy the plumbing or something, and we can say, well, as property owner, I wouldn't be okay with that, or I think that the tree is worth that. So I want to keep some role for us to exercise judgment as representatives of the people of Albany on that portion.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I just think
it's very important for there to be a public forum. It's just that I would prefer to have decisions about tree health and safety.
Right, yes.
Would be maintained by city staff. And the way that the code currently reads is that those sort of public safety ones are also in the hands of the commission.
Oh, are they? Yeah, I don't.
So, you know, public safety, if there, by some crazy circumstance, there's no commission meeting that month and a tree is unsafe, there's very little that the city has by way of authority to take action unless the tree is a immediate
risk, yeah, or immediate
hazard.
risk, yeah.
So that really
Sure, I think it's.
that really needs to shift out of the commission's domain and shift back onto city staff, because it is the city's responsibility to maintain the right-of-way free of hazards. Yeah.
I don't think we disagree.
I don't think anybody disagrees with that.
Well, I think people disagree. But I don't think about other things. I don't think we disagree with it. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that, yeah, most of what you presented is just your research, and, you know, there's not much you can say about that. But the next one is going to be more interesting, where you're trying to implement policy. And one thing I did notice is that some of your research is, I guess, assuming, for instance, that 24 inches will stay 24 inches of the gap from curb to sidewalk. And whether you will be looking at other options like, I don't know, structural soil into the sidewalk, rubber sidewalk, or who was it that sent in the diagram of carrying out concrete, but actually adding bulb outs here and there where possible. I'm not sure how far you'll be exploring that, or if you'll just be looking at existing conditions and trees that'll work in the existing conditions.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any assumption around what parkway size is, and we are certainly not making any assumptions about parkway size. What we are trying to promote by way of this document and pretty much every document that we would be a part of is identifying the space available and then making a conscious decision about what will fit well in that space, both from a landscape architecture frame, but also from what the site is suitable and can hold. And we are huge proponents of using alternative methodology around sidewalk repair and enlarging sidewalk spaces. Both the city has committed to doing that within their sidewalk repair program, and using all kinds of different techniques to prepare sidewalks for or sustain sidewalks and passable right-of-ways without damaging tree roots. So, yeah, we definitely would. We just want there to be a conscious decision, which there is, a conscious decision about the available space and what will work well in that available space. But again, it does take that resident buy-in, right? So John and the city could want there to be a large tree planted somewhere, but if the resident has identified that they would prefer to see a smaller tree planted, the city at this point can't override that.
Right.
So I don't think any code is going to make that change. That really is about education. And, you know, this body has a lot of opportunity to talk about the importance of planting those larger trees, maximizing our benefits.
And I think likely any program that was going to alter the sidewalk, and it would be a multi-commission. It wouldn't be
Yeah, so
just,
you can have
it certainly wouldn't be
existing-
Parks and Rec
If
Commission.
existing will be standard, then you'll have options that potentially included. depending on-
Right, it's more like a separate program that would
Right,
be,
yeah.
which I think would be not a bad idea.
And I do want to mention, not to drag this out or beat a dead horse or whatever the right thing is for this, but we look at tree planting lists and lists as a work in progress. we're always identifying new trees in our industry, that new tree species that haven't been planted for, hundreds of years. They find an acorn on Catalina Island, and they're able to cultivate this one new variety that's doing really well in planting pits and, wherever. Those kinds of things, we should be on the forefront of those planting opportunities, because our urban forest is changing all the time. And we want to be part of that change. We want to be a part of figuring out if these species are going to work here or they're not. The only way to do that is by planting more trees and trying to figure out what's going to be successful in the right-of-way. So when we hand over a list to a city, we want that to be, we never want to print it. We want to send it as a document that they can, make notes on and scratch out things and change things, because it's a work in progress.
One more thing, keeping an eye on time, I want to leave room for the last item. Education has been mentioned a few times. Will some sort of education recommendation or program be part of the final plan, or is that just kind of for us to develop separately? It's not really management, it's more like...
Yeah, I think we definitely have an eye on the website, and some ideas about, changes that could be made day one. And we would be really excited to help with that.
We need to have a City Arbor Day celebration. I'm not kidding. I think that could be a real opportunity.
I think that's already in the report as one of our
There we go,
recommendations.
see?
Okay, there we go.
For sure.
Try not to do your job here. All right, any other, have we given you some valuable feedback? I hope that
Absolutely.
you knew what you need. All right, all right. All right, any other?
I really appreciate the callers who called in.
Yes,
as well.
yes, very much so. Yeah, trees, people are very passionate about it, and rightly so. So
Yeah,
it's a good
absolutely.
thing. I'm
They're
glad
the
we had that
best.
buy-in, yeah. All right, any other comments? Seeing none, we can thank you very much, and we can move on to the next item.
Thank you.
All right, Memorial Park tree update. We're just going to change our name to the Tree Commission.
Okay. Am I controlling this, or?
John, I've got control, so
Okay.
you give me the sign.
Forward.
Uh-oh, thought I
This,
had control.
is this the one that's in the folder?
Yes.
Because I had a different first slide here.
This is in the
Had
folder.
autumn trees in the first slide, not the spring trees here.
Let me. If you can bring it up, you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Oh, well, just, we can go ahead with this. I made some edits this morning that hopefully will show up. But if not, it's fine. It's fine.
This is from yesterday, so it's not showing up in
Okay.
the folder. So
It's fine. It should be fine. So, I'm John Hawkridge, urban forester. This is just a continuation from last month. I presented the Terrace Park and Ocean View Park, and this month we have Memorial Park update. Okay, so again, we had tree management experts do an assessment of all the trees in the three main parks in the city. Their assessments were done according to ISA standards. They did track level 2 inspections on all trees 3 inches DBH or greater, which in Albany, 3 inches is officially a tree. Track level 2 is a basic ground level where you examine visual inspection. We examine the roots, the crown, the branches, the foliage, all of that. Trees are rated into 3 risk categories: low, moderate, and high. Rankings consider the risk rankings. The rankings consider the risk of injury to people or property damage that might occur from complete or partial tree failure, like large limb failure. They did recommend some trees for removal in this park. The assessments also recommend pruning and monitoring to reduce risk and preserve the trees. Next. So there were 56 trees included in this assessment. 43 were found to be low risk, 13 found to be moderate risk, and 6 trees recommended for removal. There were no high-risk trees in Memorial Park, which is a good thing. There were also recommendations made for pruning, and one of their main concerns were concerning the London plane trees, which are a continuation of Ramona that head into the Memorial Building. There's a double row of London plane trees there. Sycamore, some people call them sycamore. They're a cross with a different species of sycamore tree. So in this map, we can see, we'll run through these in a little more detail, but this is the list of trees that they have the most concern about in this assessment. So tree 114, I guess,
Go back to
can we
should
go
I
back
to
and
this side?
I'll
Here we go. I can do
read my
this.
notes off of this. I should have combined this if I have it here.
14 is right here.
Actually, I don't have that in here. Anyway, the London plane tree 114 is when I get these evaluations, I go back and look at all these trees again, and I make my own evaluation considering their concerns about each tree. So the London plane trees, each one of these were pollarded. Pollarding is where you cut all the branches off and you leave this kind of strange-looking nubby thing, which is actually, we call that the fist, and knuckles, where the new shoots are removed. These were pollarded probably for years and years, and at some point, it seems like around 2015, I think I found on Google Street View, where I could see where new shoots were starting, they started leaving the new shoots grow out. So now there's, similar to the liquid amber that we talked about for removal last month, the point where everything was cut off, there's new shoots that grow out and all these branches were left to grow. With this tree, it's a little less hazardous than a liquid amber tree. These are trees that are the typical tree for pollarding. So I'm looking at these London plane trees, and to me, they're not much of a concern. We're going to have them pruned a little bit to reduce some end weight on some branches that look a little precarious. But yeah, that's our action for both or 3 of the London plane trees. But I'll talk about the others a little bit more. The next tree is a jacaranda tree that's out sort of in the middle of the field there. When they did this assessment, that tree looked really poor. There was hardly anything to the tree. And now that our guys have upgraded the irrigation system, it's looking really nice. It's really lush, and I included a picture in the staff report. I think I have I don't know if I have a picture in this slide, but it's looking much better, so there's no real concern about that. 137 is a Brazilian pepper tree down the driveway in the back by the picnic area, the barbecue area. This tree just needs to be raised up a little bit. I've had a request from our maintenance crew also to do this work. So this will be just get a general pruning to raise up the crown all around. Number 150 is an Italian cypress tree, which is dead. In the staff report, the picture, looks like there might be a bit of a crown, but that's a tree that's overarching the standing dead Italian cypress. Number 151 has maybe 10% living portions to it. Both of these trees should be removed. There's no rescuing these trees or improving the condition, especially the dead one. The other one will be dead in a couple months anyway. So number 152 also shows signs of decline. This is, what's happened here is a canker. It's a cypress canker that kind of eats away at these trees. The majority of this tree still has some life to it, so for now we'll just prune out the bad parts. It may last for years for now. It may go into rapid decline too, but for now we're good with that. Next tree is crepe myrtle, which is in that same area with the 3 Italian cypress, and that tree is basically dead. There's a few leaves from this season in the very top of the canopy, or what, if you can call it a canopy. There's also some decay that goes up the side of the tree. In looking at the tree, on either side, there were large limbs ripped off, so I think that's kind of what put this tree into this state. And there's another crepe myrtle, I forget where, I think on the other side of the building, that's, if you compare the two, you can see a nice lush green crepe myrtle as opposed to this one. So this one I'd like to have removed. Again, it'll be dead in a couple months if we don't remove it. London Plane number 156. This tree is another one where they're concerned. What happens with the pollarding, like anytime you kind of top off a tree, there's decay where those cuts were made. With the London plane tree, they have a good woundwood response growth where there's wounds, so you can see this kind of rounded, it's like scar tissue that's actually stronger than the initial tree there. So that tree, again, we'll do some pruning. All of the London plane trees will get some general pruning done. Not too much of a concern. Number 157 is across from that one. And that one, you can see some real decay throughout the tree, but again, the woundwood is so strong and so well developed there. I'm not very concerned at this point. I think this one was suggested for removal. I don't think we need to go that far. We'll prune it up, and we're going to prune up the other tree to kind of give it a little more space to grow out, and we'll see what happens next year. We have at least a year with the tree. I'm not concerned about tree failure there. Next slide. And then I've listed 31 more trees for pruning just for general maintenance. The 2 redwoods have suckers, as redwoods will do. They grow up suckers around the base of the trunk. They'll be pruned up, cleaned up. Next slide. So here's pictures of the jacaranda, the Italian cypress. Jacaranda's doing really nicely. I'm really happy to see that. That's a tree that struggles as a street tree because it likes a little extra moisture. Okay, next. And here's the crepe myrtle again, and it's a little bit hard to see the dead section growing up the side of that tree, and you can't see the tears in this picture, but that's that tree. Next slide. Okay, for future considerations. So just to wrap it up in general, there's 3 trees that I plan on removing there. 3 basically dead trees, not completely, but far enough gone that they need to be removed. We'll do some replacement trees. We won't replace them with Italian cypress trees. It's not a good tree. Because of the canker, there's another one on Ventura that's a street tree that's pretty bad with cypress canker. So we'll replace them with something else, and possibly not in the same locations, especially the one that's under the pear tree, because we can't plant a tree under an existing tree. So there are planning opportunities in Memorial Park, and I've brought this up in the past and was kind of shot down because of the activity at Memorial Park. The field is used for many different events, and I still feel like there is opportunity. I feel we could outline the field, or there's lots of little places here and there where we can put trees. So maybe this is something we could talk about in the future. I can come up with some suggestions on what kind of trees and where to plant. The parks, as we sort of mentioned in the earlier presentation, might be good places for native trees, live oaks possibly in the parks would be good. Other coffee berry trees, toyons, smaller trees would be great in the parks. We don't need to have a raised crown in the park. We can have a shrubby kind of native tree. There are, as far as I understand, there's a few new trees planned to be planted in the dog park as part of the...
Yeah, I think there's going to be several trees lining the fence on the west side.
Along the baseball field side, yeah. So that will be an addition to the park. One of the problems with trees in the park and that crepe myrtle and some of those trees in the field are examples. They get a little bit beat up, people running into them, trying to climb them and ripping branches off and all that. We get kids like to climb trees, so we kind of have to keep an eye on these and protect trees from park users, and we also have to protect the park users from the trees. So need to consider aging trees and replacements for these trees, and mostly I'm thinking along the lines of the London plane trees. These are the older trees, and there is decay, and they're getting to the point where there's a little bit concern with these trees. So we continue the maintenance, we continue these periodic assessments, and I think, personally, with the addition of more trees, I think Memorial Park will be in really good shape. So.
All right.
And that's it.
Thank you very much. Any, yeah.
Actually, John, can you touch on the large, I don't know if it's a eucalyptus tree, the one...
Oh, one of the trees of concern is this large eucalyptus that's in the back northwest corner by the batting cage and the tennis courts. That's dropped large limbs in the past. We've had it pruned up a couple years ago to reduce end weight, and we're going to do that again too. And I spoke to the contractor who we're going to have do this work and told them to be a little extra.
Aggressive,
Yeah.
conservative or something.
Yeah. So there's that. I don't think there's any.
That's what I was very happy to see that wasn't flagged as a high-risk tree. It's one that we get a lot of comments about throughout the year, so.
It's a healthy tree, and it does drop branches occasionally. So that's somewhat of a concern, but it is a healthy tree. It's just the position of that tree with the batting cages and the tennis courts.
This isn't in that little garden area. This is the one
It's
outside of it.
just outside the garden area.
Because we removed a large one that was in the garden area.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Yeah, there was a really, really big one there, yeah.
It's across the pathway, right along the.
I was always looking at the garden, so I didn't, or the batting cage. All right.
Yes, so also the assessment didn't include trees on the Thousand Oaks side of the park and the ball field. It didn't include the row of liquid amber along the dog park. They kind of stopped at the community garden. And I did include the liquid amber along the dog park to be pruned. I think those definitely need to be improved, need to be pruned for reduced risk for dog park users. I think that's about it.
I mean, do we need to evaluate the ones along Thousand Oaks?
We do, yes. They're large old trees.
I wondered if that's school property or something, but no, that's still.
No, that's public right away.
Yeah.
My guess is the next time we do this, we'll include them.
We've had those pruned. We had that whole row of trees pruned last year or a year and a half or so ago. But yeah,
They're nice big trees, no,
they're nice
Very
big, but
nice.
they're aging trees, and there's some Monterey pines and things that are not the greatest tree to have hovering over a active ball field.
Yeah, any questions for the?
Yeah, one question I had was the Memorial Park, you mentioned there's some places you've thought of that could be good for trees. There's a lot of grass there, and there's pros and cons to grass, but it is one of the few parks that has a lot of grass, lawn space, particularly for people that don't have grassy, large lawns in their own homes. So what kind of public process would be involved with choosing sites for trees? Are there some sites that you think would be zero controversy and the city can just make the call, or you can just make the call, or are there some other places or all places you think should go through a public process to decide on where to put trees in Memorial Park?
Sure. I think for the most part, what I see at that park, most of the users are huddled under the tree, in the shade of trees there. So I think shade is appreciated, but there are playing fields. There's two right behind the high school, and then up from that on the Portland side. That's basically playing fields there. I wouldn't want to populate that unless you all decide that we want to make a little forest there. I'd be all for that, but I understand we need the space, we need the playing field, we need the lawn. I'm thinking along the edges, outlining, accentuating the lawn spaces, the playing field spaces. Around the building where we're going to be removing the Italian cypress, we can put in some trees there. There are some spaces here and there that are not necessarily actively used for the lawn itself. But as I mentioned, I can come up with suggestions and bring it to the commission, and we can talk about it some more. So.
Having brought my kid there a lot and kids and seeing all the other kids, so I know exactly what you say. Those trees take a lot of abuse, and almost every kid in Albany learned how to climb trees somewhere on that site. And I had to kind of, what's more important, that the kid learn how to climb a tree, or me as a city representative stopping him from having fun? So it's like I don't say anything, but it seems like if we did clip some of the lower branches off, then they wouldn't be pulled off, or
Sure.
some of those kids go way up.
I do that when no one's looking, yes.
Yeah, it's, okay, right. And a ladder is probably not a good idea. And I think over on the Thousand Oaks Street, there was some memorial trees, I think it was a redwood.
On the Portland side,
Cedar? Oh, Portland.
there's,
Portland, yeah.
on the Carmel and Portland corner of the park,
Yeah.
there is the Dawn Redwood, I think, is a memorial tree.
Yeah, I thought there were a couple.
There's a memorial tree that Peggy McQuaid requested that we had planted there,
Maybe that's the one.
red maple. Yeah,
No, these are evergreens. I think it was a redwood and a cedar. And
I mean,
on Thousand Oaks
maybe I
side?
got the street wrong.
I'm not
It's,
sure.
It's when you go to Portland, it's a cross street there, at the end of the park. Isn't that?
Carmel.
Oaks? It's
Yeah,
Carmel, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so right there, and they were often used that to tie onto and create a jump rope that they tie somewhere else, and then they would climb up that. And so I've seen that you have pruned that up a little, and so that's really great. And all of a sudden, those small redwood trees near the bandstand, they were using those because they're close to each other. There's kind of a cluster of, I think, 2 or 3 of them together.
I just raised the one small one right
Yeah, they
behind the
would push
bandstand.
off and climb up them, in some kind of parkour manner and get to the top.
Yeah, yeah.
is your job to kill fun? Is that what you're here for?
I don't stop them. That's what I mean. That's killing me. I don't stop them.
Well, that's something I question too, because we do kind of encourage
I
kids to
know,
be kids.
it's like,
and,
it's more valuable, this great experience for them on the branch of the tree. So, but we could kind of find that line where we protect the tree. anyway, just,
What I'm concerned is when the tree's getting damaged more.
yeah, right.
Kids
and-
bounce off the ground. No.
Yes, it's a fine line, a little bit of,
Kids will grow back.
a little
Kids are
abuse makes
pretty,
it stronger, but too
resilient,
much
yeah.
instead.
But there's a arborvitae on the Portland side that's got a buckeye growing too close to it. That's always got ripped branches. I'm always there cutting off branches.
That's right.
Redwood behind the bandstand, I just raised, but only about a 6-foot level, so now it's actually more climbable, but it's not really large enough to raise it
Well,
much
that was
more
where
than
the
that.
2-year-olds were learning how to grow, so you got them out of it. And
That's
that
where they
one,
hid from.
to go further, that one sycamore that you mentioned that used to be bollarded, that's kind of hollow in the top. All the kids go and hang out in there. There's a lot of toys in that spot. It's a nest.
I did find a couple little toys while I was there. Yeah, yeah. Well, all of those, everything in the park that needs it is going to get raised up a little bit. The redwoods were all raised, again, about a year and a half ago. But some of them need a little extra. But yeah, that's, I don't think we should be encouraging children to climb trees. If they
wasn't
want to
encouraging.
do that in their yard, you know.
A lot of them all have that, though, so yeah.
So.
I don't think I have any questions before we, all right, we can open for public comment if there's any public comment to be had.
No hands are raised online.
Okay. Bring it back for comments then.
Just that it would be good, I think we do need a public process for the tree planting. I would look forward to seeing proposals for where to put trees. I like this discussion we've been having about the parks because it is really liberating in a lot of ways. There's definitely all sorts of constraints, especially with how the parks are used in various ways, but it's liberating in that you don't have to deal with this tiny little well, you know, for a street tree.
Yeah.
You can have just any kind of tree practically, you know, the much broader palette.
The larger canopy trees that we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about are better suited for the parks, yeah.
For climbing too. Any other, the comment I was going to make is that my understanding is that the park was designed and planted to leave a lot of room for memorial trees, literally to create a memorial grove over time.
Yeah,
So maybe one thing we need to do is just encourage that. I mean, we have memorial trees there, let's make them more prominent or something, new plaques, or be sure people understand this. That way it can serve that purpose. I think it was intentional.
the way it is now from that dawn redwood, then there's I guess the jacaranda, I'm not sure if that was planted as a memorial. And then there's
I think
Peggy's
the plan was to
tree.
outline, like you're saying, outlining those fields. I think
They're
that was
kind
the
of outlining that arbor with the
layer,
vines. There's kind of starting to form an arc in that direction, which I think is fine. That's not really play field
Right.
section of the park, so, yeah.
But that's also a way to get some other people to help pay for it. But yeah, no, thank you. Any other comments? I think you're not really looking for anything from us, just thanks. Yeah, all right. All right, well, you have it. All right,
Thank you.
All right. I don't know if there's any subcommittee update on the Greenway. Yeah, okay, all right. We are then moving on to future agenda items. I don't think there's an agenda item from the gentleman who spoke at the beginning about the football field, the soccer field. I mean, that's not really for us.
No, what I was going to do is talk with the recreation folks and have them reach out. I
know there's a lot of competition for these fields.
I don't want to wade in. I don't want to wade into that.
Yeah.
They're
But kudos to him for going through the process and showing up here.
and the fields are well used.
Oh, I know. There's a lot of competition. There's not enough field space around here, period.
Right.
Yeah.
So we are looking for November to be phase 2 of the street tree management plan. So that's going to be maybe a more robust discussion about the different options and the path forward. We're also looking at Prop 68 updates. I was hoping to get some information on the Albany Greenway Park, the replacement of the equipment. We
Okay.
may or may not have that fully vetted at this point. We've got a lot on our plate right now. And then there might be a potential that the Albany Hill project may come back either this month or the following month. So again, we've got pretty packed agendas.
Yeah. All right.
So, what about at Monday's city council meeting? I was watching the video of it, and they mentioned somebody, maybe it was the city manager's report. It's not an Albany property, but there's the fields next to Golden Gate Fields. What are those called? The play fields.
The Tom Bates Fields? The
Tom
play
Bates
fields
Fields.
just south of it?
Yeah. So, and my understanding is that there's like at least 3, maybe 4 cities that pay into that, and Albany's one of them.
Yes.
And that area hasn't really been part of our purview. I don't know who helps make those decisions and all that. Do you know?
Could probably look.
So that,
I
but
get my involvement, I get the invoice.
okay. So that would be, I'd be interested in hearing more about that. In particular, I think the public would also be interested in hearing a little bit more about that area, because at the city council meeting, they mentioned that the group that does implement the stuff there had received a certain number of grants, and they said not for all the plans that they had, but some of the plans that they had, and that included new pickleball courts, for example.
Yeah, I heard that too. Yeah.
And maybe one more soccer field or one more, I forget exactly what kind of field, but it would be good to get some sort of update from somebody who's intimately involved with that.
I have seen, I think those plans are online. I have seen them.
Okay.
It's like, it's not a pickleball, it's a pickleball complex. It's really impressive.
Okay, yeah, so it's news to me, and so I think the public would,
It's more news it's news to me as well. So
Okay.
let me dig into it, and I'm not sure we'll be able to get it in the next 2 meetings, but sometime.
yeah. Uh-huh,
That's something to get on the agenda, because that'd be very interesting, I
yeah,
think.
okay.
All right, that it? All right, everybody, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice meeting. Yeah, it was fun.
It's Memorial Park, the